The most expensive restaurant in the city looked more like a museum full of bored people. Perfect tables, glasses lined up, dim lights, and fake laughs bouncing around the room. Arthur Menezes, a millionaire known for the tech companies he managed, sat across from yet another date his friends insisted he needed to go on. The elegant woman in front of him, dressed head to toe in designer clothes, scrolled through her phone without even noticing he was there. "You didn't answer my question," Arthur said, trying to keep the conversation from dying. "Oh, sorry." She finally lifted her eyes. "I was checking a trip to Paris. Everyone is going. You should go too, Arthur. Every millionaire goes." He gave a half smile, the kind that appears only when patience is hanging by a thread. He was exhausted with that world where everything had a price, except people. "I asked what your dream is." "Dream?" She laughed like the word was childish. "My dream is to not worry about anything, and let's be honest, you can make that happen." Arthur leaned back in his chair. It was always the same script: interest, image, bragging. Nobody ever asked what he wanted. Nobody really saw him. When dinner finally ended, she asked, "Arthur, are you taking me home in your car, or should we call the driver?" He simply signaled to the valet. She walked ahead, showing off her expensive purse like a trophy. He didn't answer. He just wanted to leave. In the parking lot, as he opened the car door, Arthur felt a tightness in his chest, like he was trapped in a life he never chose. Too much money, too little humanity. He started the engine and drove away without looking back. At the first stoplight outside the fancy district, something completely different caught his attention. A thin woman, hair tied up any way she could manage, cleaned windshields with fast, precise movements. The cold night wind hit her face, but she kept going. Next to her, a small improvised cart made of cardboard boxes sheltered a little boy, maybe 6 years old, curled up with sleep. Everyone else ignored that scene, except him. When she walked up to Arthur's car holding the squeegee and a cloth, he lowered the window. "Good evening, want me to clean it?" she asked. No smile, but no bitterness either. A tired face, yet honest. Arthur hesitated. He didn't want to be just another rich guy throwing cash like he was dropping crumbs. "What's your name?" he asked. She frowned slightly. "Isabella. How much do you charge?" "Whatever you want to give, but I clean first. You pay after. Work is work." Before he could respond, she started cleaning the glass with care, almost as if she were polishing something precious. Her son watched with half-closed eyes. Arthur felt something pinch inside his chest. Her simplicity, her dignity. It clashed harshly with the dinner he had just endured. When she finished, she stepped back. "Ready, sir?" Arthur placed a folded bill in her hand. She looked at it and handed it back. "That's too much. It's not right." He froze. Never, absolutely never, had someone returned money to him. "Keep it. For your work," Arthur insisted. "I don't want you thinking I'm asking. I work. If you want to help, buy food over there for my boy. But money like this, no." Arthur didn't move. She spoke like she carried something bigger than anything he could buy. "What's his name?" he asked, gesturing toward the child. "Caio." The boy coughed. A dry, tight cough that hit Arthur harder than it should have. Something inside him cracked. He wanted to help, but the way she carried herself made one thing clear. She didn't accept charity. The light turned green. Cars behind him honked. "Thank you, Isabella," Arthur said genuinely. "Good night, sir." He drove away slowly, but the image of her cleaning that windshield with pride, protecting her son even in hardship, stuck to his mind. It wasn't pity. It was admiration. Rare, pure. Arthur parked in the garage of his luxury building, but when he stepped out of the car, he felt like that place no longer made sense. Everything was too silent, too spotless, too empty. Inside the elevator, staring at his reflection, he whispered, "What's happening to me?" But it wasn't confusion. It was clarity. For the first time in a long while, someone had reached past the armor he built. Not some rich woman full of demands. Not someone chasing his fortune, but a single mother washing windows in the middle of the night who returned money out of honesty. And that brief, unexpected moment was only the beginning of something he couldn't explain yet, but strong enough to shift his entire path. Over the next few days, Arthur tried to distract himself with meetings, contracts, postponed trips, and endless company emails. But every night the same scene replayed in his head. Isabella cleaning the glass carefully, handing back part of the money, and saying firmly, "I work, I don't beg." That sentence carried a weight he couldn't describe. It felt like a truth nobody dared to speak in his world. On the third night, tired of his own restlessness, Arthur got in his car and drove aimlessly. The city was cold, with the smell of wet asphalt and lights reflecting on tall buildings. He turned the corner near the main avenue, and there she was again. Isabella, holding the squeegee, her fingers red from the cold, was cleaning the window of some random car, while her son slept curled up inside an open box with a thin blanket on top. Arthur stopped a few meters away. Something inside him pushed him to come back. It wasn't curiosity, it was respect. When she finished the other car and turned to the next one, she noticed his. She walked toward it without realizing who it was, just doing what she did every night. "Good evening," she said, pulling the cloth from her pocket. Arthur lowered the window. "Hi, Isabella." She widened her eyes in surprise. "You again. I thought the first time was just coincidence." He didn't reply right away. He didn't want to look like a rich guy showing up to rescue someone. "I was just driving by," he said simply. She nodded and began cleaning the glass. He tried to hand her the payment, but Isabella stepped back a little. "I finish first, then you decide what it's worth to you." While she worked, Arthur watched her movements. Every motion carried strength, but also care. She wasn't someone cleaning windows because she had no options. She was someone doing what needed to be done, and doing it well. When she finished, Arthur handed her a bill, but something caught his attention. The boy, Kaio, coughed again, a harsher cough than the night before. Arthur walked closer to the makeshift cart and saw the kid hugging himself, trying to stay warm. "Is he sick?" Arthur asked, worried. Isabella turned quickly, as if afraid of being judged. "He just has a cold. The doctor said it'll pass." "Did he take any medicine?" "Whatever I could afford," she answered, looking away. "He's shaking, Isabella." She took a deep breath, a breath loaded more with exhaustion than pride. "I know, but I can't miss tonight. I already missed 2 days last week because he had a fever, and if I miss more, I can't pay for the room we're sleeping in." Arthur felt a knot tighten in his chest. "I can help, No!" She cut in, firm but not rude. "I appreciate it, truly, but I can't accept anything I didn't work for." He stayed silent. It was rare to find someone so unyielding. In his world, even rich people didn't have that kind of moral spine. "Then tell me how I can help through work." He tried to find a respectful way in, without crossing her boundaries. Isabella looked at him for a few seconds, as if trying to figure out if he was being sincere or just another bored onlooker. "Just buy him something warm to eat. That I'll accept. But the money is for my work, not for pity." Arthur nodded, respecting her terms. He went to the bakery on the corner and came back with a bag containing soup, bread, and juice. Isabella thanked him with a small but genuine smile. While the boy ate, Arthur crouched down beside him. "Feeling better?" he asked. The boy nodded slowly, his eyes still tired. With each gesture, each word from that moment, Arthur felt more clearly that there was something noble in that woman, that the whole world overlooked. "Do you come here often?" he asked. "I try to stay at these lights because they're busy, but sometimes the police make us leave, so I move around. It's dangerous. Everything in life is dangerous. I just need to keep my son with me." The sentence sliced through Arthur, strength and fragility in the same breath. Cars behind them began honking. Isabella stepped back, gripping the squeegee. "Thank you for the food and the conversation." Arthur wanted to say more, but no words came. He only nodded. As she walked away, he watched her in the rear-view mirror, that woman who faced the world with a courage richer people he knew never had. He drove off with a disturbing certainty. Something in him was shifting, and changes like that never happen without a reason. The next day seemed ordinary, until it wasn't. Arthur had an important meeting with foreign investors, but his mind was far from spreadsheets and forecasts. While the partners discussed numbers, he kept seeing flashes from another scene. The boy coughing under a thin blanket, Isabella cleaning windows with dignity, the fear in her eyes hidden beneath strength. During the meeting, his phone buzzed, just a normal notification. But the real discomfort came from something else, a strange weight in his chest, like he had left something unfinished, something more important than any deal. He tried to ignore it, but couldn't. That night, heavy rain fell across the city, the kind that makes cars create curtains of water and traffic lights blink in shaky red. Arthur drove home, tired, and the storm made the world look blurred. As he passed the same avenue where he had seen Isabella days earlier, something unexpected happened. Arthur's car sputtered again, then died. "You've got to be kidding me," Arthur muttered, tapping the steering wheel. He tried turning it on, but nothing, just a dry noise. The storm got worse, and cars swerved around him with honks and bright headlights. He stepped out into the rain and opened the hood, pretending he understood engines. He didn't. He was good with tech, numbers, strategies, not with a car broken down in the middle of a storm. Then he heard hurried footsteps on the sidewalk. "Need help?" Arthur lifted his head. He recognized the voice before even looking. Isabella was there, soaked, holding the squeegee like it was part of her arm. Her hair was stuck to her forehead, her simple clothes drenched, and even so, there was strength in that woman. "I think the car just died," Arthur said, embarrassed. She gave a small smile, not mocking, but the kind of smile from someone who has seen that problem 1,000 times. "Open it again. Let me take a look." Arthur stepped back. She leaned the squeegee against the light pole, grabbed the hood with both hands, and inspected the engine like a doctor checking a patient. "Did you try starting it more than once?" she asked. "About 10 times, he admitted. She nodded, focused. Then she adjusted one part, tightened another, and said, "Try it now." Arthur got in, turned the key, and the engine purred instantly. He looked shocked, almost laughed. "How did you do that?" "Your car wasn't dead," she replied, picking up the squeegee again. "It was just soaked. This street floods all the time. Water must have hit one of the sensors. I just dried the right spot." Arthur stared at her like he was witnessing a miracle. "Isabella, you know mechanics?" She shrugged modestly. "Life taught me this and a bunch of things I never wanted to learn." The rain kept pouring, but in that moment it felt like only the two of them existed. "Can I give you a ride somewhere?" "You're soaked. You'll get sick," Arthur insisted. "No, thanks. I just needed to make sure you wouldn't stay stuck in the street. Rich folks think they don't need anyone, but in the rain, everybody needs help." He laughed, not mockingly, but because she was right, and she laughed too. For a second, just 1 second, the harsh world she lived in felt a bit lighter. The boy, Caio, appeared on the sidewalk with a small bag in his hands. "Mom, I got the bottles." Arthur looked at the bag. Plastic bottles gathered in the rain, probably to sell for a few cents at the recycler. Isabella took the bag, thanked her son, and placed her hand on his head. "It's freezing, Caio. Let's go under the bus stop roof." Arthur felt an impulse. Let me at least buy him a jacket. Isabella stopped, turned slowly. There wasn't anger in her face, something deeper. "I know you want to help, but I can't accept that." "Why?" "Because help that comes with a price isn't help. One day, people throw it in your face. And I've lived that before." Arthur swallowed hard. He understood without needing details. In the silence of the rain, he recognized something he had never really had. Someone who said no to his money. "Then let me ask something," he said gently. "How can I help without crossing the line?" She thought for a few seconds. "Talking to me like you did just now. Sometimes that's worth more than anything." He had never received a compliment so sincere. Isabella gave a small nod and walked away with her son. Arthur stayed there, leaning against the car she had brought back to life, watching as that woman disappeared into the rain with a strength he didn't realize he admired so much. And at that moment, it was clear. She had saved his car. But without knowing, she had started saving him too. Arthur woke up the next morning with a strange feeling, the urge to return to the street where Isabella worked. He tried ignoring it, tried focusing on his office, his reports, his million-dollar projects. But unlike the women he usually dated, Isabella didn't fade from his mind after he slept. She returned, always returned. By late afternoon, he made a spontaneous decision. He grabbed his car and drove to the same intersection. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, until he saw the improvised cart, the blue bucket, and the squeegee leaning on the pole. Isabella was there, as always, fighting the world with her own hands. He parked near the sidewalk and stepped out. Isabella lifted her eyes and frowned, surprised. "You again?" "You can call me Arthur," he said, trying to soften the formality. She hesitated for a moment, as if evaluating whether it was safe to let him into the small circle of trust she had. "All right, Arthur," she replied. No smile, but respectful. He noticed her fatigue, the dark circles, the skin marked by short nights. But still, there was a firmness in her posture that seemed unbreakable. "Can I buy you some water?" he offered, trying to start a conversation. "No need. I manage." Arthur wanted to talk to her but didn't know how without sounding intrusive. Before he could come up with anything, a luxury SUV pulled up beside them. The window lowered, and 3 of Arthur's friends appeared. Rich people used to fancy restaurants, overseas trips, imported cars, and zero connection to anything outside gated communities. "Arthur?" One of them laughed. "You here? What is this, a movie scene?" Another added, "Dude, you're talking to, I don't know, a window cleaner." "That's a new one." Isabella froze, like someone who had been through this kind of silent humiliation too many times. Arthur felt his blood boil. "What are you guys doing here?" he snapped. The woman inside the SUV, a socialite famous on social media, looked Isabella up and down with disgust. "This is ridiculous, Arthur. Look where you are. Look who you're with." Isabella took a slow breath, grabbed her squeegee and stepped away, clearly unwilling to stay for what was coming next. The quiet humiliation hurt more than any insult. Arthur walked quickly toward his friend's car. "Can you leave now?" The driver laughed. "Relax, Arthur. We're just kidding. We've never seen you socializing with this kind of people." Arthur's expression hardened. "Then learn it today. Respect everyone, every single person." A tense silence followed. The SUV sped off, leaving behind nothing but the sound of the engine and the dust of arrogance. Arthur went back to Isabella, but her eyes were distant, colder now. "You didn't have to do that," she said, not angry, just disappointed. "Do what? Treat your friends like they were wrong just because they said the truth?" Arthur frowned. "They were disrespectful." "Yes, but that doesn't change who I am," she replied. "I've heard much worse." That hurt him more than it hurt her. Isabella carried scars he couldn't even imagine. Arthur tried to speak, but she interrupted again. "Look, Arthur, I appreciate that you came here, but I don't want you fighting with anyone because of me. I don't need that." He took a slow breath. "I know you don't, but I wanted to." She placed the squeegee inside the bucket and looked at her son, who was playing with 2 bottle caps on the ground. "I don't want attention," she finally said. "The more invisible I am, the better for Caio. Rich people can argue and move on with their lives. I can't." Arthur understood exactly what that meant. For her, a single wrong step could cost the room they slept in, the food they ate, the safety of her child. It wasn't pride, it was survival. He lowered his voice. "I'm sorry, Isabella. I didn't mean to expose you." Her shoulders relaxed. Acceptance, not warmth. "It's okay, but I need to work." Arthur stepped back a bit, giving her space. He leaned against his car and watched quietly. He wanted to understand her world, not invade it. Meanwhile, a couple walked by and whispered, "Poor guy, must be lost. Or she's trying to scam him," the other muttered. The words hit Arthur like a punch. He couldn't understand how anyone could look at Isabella, her sick child, her effort, and see malice. He approached again, unsure what to say. "Can I stay here, just to keep you company? No interfering." She looked at him for a few seconds. Arthur waited like someone who knew she had every right to send him away. Isabella finally said, "You can, but promise you won't argue with anyone else?" He smiled. "I promise." And he stayed. There, under the streetlight, watching the flow of cars, listening to the squeegee scraping the glass, feeling the smell of rain mixed with asphalt. Arthur realized something he had never felt before. Isabella wasn't poor. She was rich in ways nobody else was. Courage, honesty, dignity, things money couldn't buy. And the more Arthur spent time near her, even just minutes a night, the more he noticed that the life he lived no longer fulfilled him. What he didn't know was that this new feeling was about to become impossible to ignore, because Isabella's world was about to collapse, and the way Arthur reacted would change everything forever. Night pushed on, and Isabella kept cleaning windshields with the same calm persistence as always. But as Arthur watched from a distance, he began noticing things he hadn't seen before. Small details revealing how much heavier her life truly was. He saw that her hands were full of tiny cuts, that her sneakers were so worn out the sole was almost touching the ground, and that little Caio slept on top of a backpack that obviously belonged to her because it was the only thing they had to use as a pillow. When traffic slowed down, Isabella put the cloth and squeegee into the bucket and called, "Caio, sweetheart, wake up, let's go." The boy rubbed his eyes and tried standing. He staggered from sleep, but held onto her shirt firmly. Arthur walked closer, not intruding, just present. "Where are you two going?" he asked. "To the room we're staying in," Isabella answered. "It's near here, but the walk is dangerous. Even so, it's what we've got." Arthur exhaled. He didn't want to treat her like someone helpless. She wasn't. She was strong, very strong, but the situation was cruel. "Can I walk with you, just to make sure you get there safely?" he offered softly. She hesitated. Her heart always built a wall first, before allowing any help. "Arthur," she began, "you're from another world. If people see you walking with me down that road, they might talk. I don't want trouble for you." "I don't care what people think," he replied. "But I care. Because I know how people are. I know how they look at me, and I know how they look at you. I don't want anyone creating labels that aren't true." Arthur respected the limit. Isabella understood danger better than he did. Of course she did. She lived it every day. "Then at least let me walk with you to the corner," he asked, "just to be sure nobody suspicious is around." She took a deep breath, then nodded. They walked together for a few meters. The neighborhood changed quickly, from a bright avenue to dim streets with old buildings and narrow alleys. Kids played barefoot at 10 at night. Men leaned against walls smoking, watching everything with suspicion. Isabella moved forward with the steady posture of someone who already knew every shadow in that place. Arthur, on the other hand, felt a genuine discomfort. It wasn't fear. It was outrage. Outrage that a woman who worked that hard had to walk through all that danger just to give her son a roof, no matter how small. When they reached a simple building with peeling paint and a sign reading "Rooms Available," she stopped. "This is it. Thanks for walking us this far," she said, keeping that emotional distance she always placed between them. "If you need anything," Arthur began. "I know," she cut in gently. "But don't worry. I'll manage. I always do." She carried her almost sleeping son in her arms and climbed the stairs. Arthur stayed there watching, feeling a deep discomfort, one he didn't even know how to name. The next day he couldn't get that scene out of his head. While signing contracts, checking charts, answering emails, he kept thinking about Isabella's cut hands, her worn-out shoes, her obsession with keeping her son safe. Trying to understand more, he returned to that neighborhood in daylight. He walked the streets, noticing the simple shops, the narrow alleys, the building where she lived. Reality there was harsh, far harsher than he imagined, and it was in a small bakery that he witnessed something that shook him. Isabella stood at the counter trying to pay for basic items: rice, pasta, bread, cough medicine for her son. The cashier added everything up and said the total. She swallowed hard. She was a few reais short. "You can take the bread off," she said. "That's all that's missing?" the cashier asked. "Take the medicine too. I'll come back another day." Arthur saw it from outside, and something broke inside him. It wasn't about money. It was about dignity, about a mother sacrificing medicine for her child just to avoid owing anyone. He walked in quickly and paid for everything without announcing who he was. He simply said, "Put it all on the same bill, please." Isabella turned immediately, startled. "Arthur, no, I told you." "I know," he interrupted calmly, "but you're not leaving here without your son's medicine. That I won't allow." She lowered her eyes. Not humiliated, just exhausted. "You're trying to be my savior," she murmured. "I'm not. I'm trying to be human," he replied. His sincerity made something inside her soften, just a little. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You've seen me 3 times. "Why?" Arthur thought, and finally told the truth. "Because you're the strongest person I've ever met, and I respect real strength, not the kind that comes from money." Isabella swallowed hard. Compliments were difficult for her. The world had never given her any reason to believe them. Little Caio grabbed the bag with the bread and smiled at Arthur. "Thank you, mister." That smile sparked something entirely new in Arthur, a feeling he had never experienced. He wasn't standing there as a millionaire. He was standing there as someone finally seeing clearly, seeing the pain, seeing the fight, seeing the dignity, and above all, seeing that she deserved far more than life had ever given her. They talked a bit outside the bakery. Isabella was more open, but still guarded. Everything about her showed someone who had lost too much, and therefore didn't let anyone get too close. But Arthur was determined to stay close. He just didn't know that from that day on, her life would get even harder, and he would play a crucial part in the turning point that was coming. After what he saw at the bakery, Arthur started seeing Isabella differently, not as someone who needed help, but as someone who carried a strength wealthy people didn't even know existed, and that, to him, was fascinating. That night, he went back to the intersection again, but not to pay for a window cleaning. He went to talk, to listen, to understand her world. When he arrived, Isabella was talking to an irritated driver who kept honking like she was blocking his way. Even tired, she stayed calm. "I've already moved, sir," she said. "Next time, think before putting that thing in front of my car," the man yelled, driving off. The car sped away. Isabella just took a slow breath, not reacting. She was used to swallowing humiliation. When she saw Arthur approaching, she quickly adjusted her hair, as if that small gesture was her only way to hold on to a bit of dignity. "Arthur, you again?" she asked, trying to hide an involuntary smile. "There's no escape, Isabella. I think I've grown attached to this intersection." She laughed, a short, tired but genuine laugh. "Okay, I can talk, but no fights with your friends, deal?" she said, crossing her arms. "Deal," he replied. For a moment, they just watched the flow of traffic. Then something unexpected happened. A young driver, distracted by his phone, passed way too close to the cart where Caio was playing, so close that one of the wheels tilted to the side. The boy jumped in fear and fell to the ground. Isabella ran instantly. "Caio, sweetheart, are you okay?" Arthur felt his chest tighten, as if he had been the one who failed to protect him. The driver didn't even look back. Isabella hugged her son, checked him for injuries, and helped him stand. "Come here," Arthur said, kneeling. "Let me see." The boy was fine, but trembling, not from pain, from fear. Isabella thanked him with a small nod, trying to regain control of the moment. "I need to get him out of here today," she murmured. "This intersection is getting way too dangerous." Arthur wanted to blurt out, "Come live with me," but he swallowed the impulse. He knew she wouldn't accept. He knew this wasn't love. It was fear and concern gripping his chest, so he stayed quiet. A few minutes later, while trying to start his car to leave, Arthur noticed something odd. The engine wouldn't start. Again. He almost laughed. It was impossible that this was a coincidence. "You're kidding," he muttered. Isabella heard him. "Trouble again?" "Yeah," he sighed. "This car wants my attention." She walked over and opened the driver's door. "Let me see." "You don't have to. I can just call roadside assist. Arthur, you know they'll take an hour to show up," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Open the hood." He obeyed. Isabella inspected the engine more carefully than most professional mechanics ever would. She ran her hand along a hose, checked a cable, examined the battery compartment. Within seconds, she found the issue. "Here, it's loose." "What is?" "The cable. It probably came undone when you drove through that huge puddle yesterday." She pulled out a small roll of electrical tape she carried in her jeans pocket. Simple, worn, but useful, and fixed the problem with impressive precision. Arthur watched her with the awe of someone seeing a hidden talent the world had missed. "Try it now," she said. Arthur got in, turned the key, and the engine came alive instantly. "Isabella, that's unbelievable." She shrugged. "I learned because I had to. Caio's father left when he found out our son needed expensive medicine, and I didn't have money to fix the car I used to own. If I didn't learn, we didn't eat." Arthur felt his throat tighten. "You shouldn't have gone through that." She gave a bitter smile. "A lot of people shouldn't, but they do." Before he could answer, a sarcastic voice cut through the air. "Well, well, look at that. The millionaire prince and the streetlight mechanic." Arthur closed his eyes before turning around. Of course, those same friends again, leaving another fancy restaurant, carrying their usual arrogance. "Arthur, do you realize how insane this looks?" one laughed. "We thought it was a joke, but you're really here with her." Isabella took a half step back. Not afraid, just ashamed of becoming entertainment. Arthur turned fully. "Don't you guys have anything better to do?" he asked, exhausted. "Dude, seriously," another insisted. "Everyone in the group chat is talking about it. Did you lose it? You're ditching high society women for that? That!" The way he said it sliced the air like a knife. Isabella lowered her face, not out of shame for who she was, but because she knew answering would only make everything worse. Arthur stepped forward. "The last time you invited me to dinner," he said, "I realized none of you know the difference between wealth and character." His friends fell silent, stunned. "I'd rather spend time with her than with any of you," Arthur finished. Isabella looked at him, startled. No one had ever defended her like that. The friends exchanged confused, irritated glances and drove away. When silence returned, Isabella approached slowly. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he said. "They were disrespectful. But you're from their world," she reminded him. Arthur looked around. The intersection, the child playing, the cold night. Then he looked at her. "Maybe I'm not. Maybe I was just in it out of habit." Isabella looked away, hiding how deeply that hit her. Their connection began to deepen. Not romance. Not yet. It was recognition, relief. Two people meeting in the middle of a storm, both knowing what it feels like to get wet. Over the next days, Arthur started showing up often, not to protect her, not to save her, but simply to be there. He brought warm snacks for Caio, but always handed them to Isabella, respecting her boundaries. She, little by little, began opening up. She shared small things, the dream of working somewhere that didn't keep her on the streets, the fear of not affording their small room, the wish to give her son a normal childhood. Arthur listened with rare attention, and the more he listened, the more he realized how intelligent, perceptive, and resourceful she was, in ways rich people never learned to be. One night, as traffic slowed, she adjusted Caio's jacket and glanced at Arthur. "You know it doesn't make sense for you to keep coming here every night, right?" "It makes sense to me," he answered. She smirked faintly. "You're weird, but in a good way. Can I take that as a compliment?" "You can." And there, in that small, forgotten intersection, something began to bloom. Not love, a seed, but seeds, when they find space, they grow. And no one knew yet, but that seed was about to face its first storm, a storm big, painful, inevitable, one that would change everything between them, and forever. The following week, the cold hit harder. It wasn't just the weather. The air around Isabella and Caio felt heavier. Arthur began noticing small signs that made him uneasy. Caio was coughing more. It wasn't that dry cough from before. Now it came from deep inside, heavy and dragging, like his small chest was carrying the weight of the world. One of those nights, Arthur arrived at the intersection and, before even seeing the cart, he heard the cough echoing down the avenue. When he got closer, he found the boy curled up, hugging himself, his face a little flushed. "Isabella, he's not okay," Arthur said, feeling his heart kick hard. She pressed her lips together, her eyes fixed on her son. "I know, but I can't miss tonight," she replied. "I already owe 1 day of rent for the room. If I miss again, the owner will throw us out." "But he has a fever," Arthur insisted. "He shouldn't be out here." Isabella took a slow breath, the kind taken by someone trying not to fall apart. "You think I don't know that?" she asked. Not harsh, just hurting. "I didn't bring him because I want to. I brought him because I don't have anyone to leave him with, and if I don't work, where do we sleep?" Arthur had no comeback. His world always had alternatives. Hers didn't. He knelt beside Caio. "Hey, buddy, how are you feeling?" "I'm fine," the boy whispered weakly. "Just cold." Arthur took off his jacket and wrapped it around the child, even knowing that didn't solve the real problem. "Isabella, he needs a doctor. I took him yesterday to the clinic," she explained. "They gave some medicine, said it was a virus, told us to go home, like we had a home to go back to." The sentence echoed in Arthur's mind like a silent accusation. A virus. As if that word magically fixed anything. The next night, things were worse. Arthur arrived later than usual. He had a long meeting with the company's board, older people obsessed with image, reputation, the company's public face. Word had spread that Arthur had been seen several times in that poorer neighborhood. Comments started circulating. "You've been walking in some rather questionable areas, Arthur," one board member said with disapproval. "People are taking pictures of you there." "And what's the problem?" Arthur asked. "The problem is the market is sensitive. The company's image is delicate. A millionaire spending time with people who have nothing to do with our world. It sends the wrong message." Arthur swallowed hard. Our world. The phrase bothered him for the rest of the day. When he finally got free and drove to the intersection, he saw only the bucket, the squeegee, and no Isabella. His heartbeat spiked. He looked around. Nothing. He asked a street vendor nearby, "You saw the woman who cleans windows here? She's always with a kid." The seller looked up. "I did. The boy got sick about 40 minutes ago. She ran with him in her arms and caught a bus to the neighborhood hospital. She was desperate." Arthur felt the ground drop beneath him. Which hospital? Minutes later, he walked through the scratched glass doors of a public hospital. The smell of cheap disinfectant, overcrowded hallways, chaos. This was a different universe from the private clinics he knew. He spotted Isabella sitting on a plastic chair, Caio lying across her lap, a hospital wristband on his tiny arm. The boy was sweating, breathing heavily. Arthur approached quietly. "Isabella." She lifted her eyes, red, shocked. "Arthur, what are you doing here?" "I came after you," he said. "They told me at the intersection." She wiped her face, trying to clear the tears. "He got worse so fast. He started shaking, complaining about his chest. I grabbed him and ran here." Arthur looked around. People waiting for hours, children crying, old people staring blankly. A monitor calling numbers painfully slow. "Has he been seen?" Arthur asked. "They did a quick check, said he's in the queue. Told us to wait." Arthur felt his blood boil. "In the queue, he's struggling to breathe." Isabella held her son tighter. "Don't make a scene, Arthur," she pleaded. "This is how it works here. If you argue, it gets worse." He breathed deeply, fighting the urge to burst through the exam room door and demand attention. At that moment, a doctor walked by. Arthur stood up and approached. "Doctor, please," he said, pointing to Isabella and Caio. "The boy over there is really sick. He needs urgent care." The doctor glanced quickly. "Has he gone through triage?" "Yes," Isabella answered from her chair. "I brought him about 20 minutes ago." "We're overcrowded," the doctor said. "We're doing our best. If he worsens, alert the nurse," and walked away. Arthur froze in the hallway, unsure whether he felt angrier at the system or himself for never having seen this reality before. He sat next to Isabella. "I can call a private hospital," he offered. "I'll pay for everything. Let's get him out of here now." Isabella stayed silent for a few seconds. "No," she said at last, not looking at him. "Isabella, this isn't the time for pride." "It's not pride," she replied, still not meeting his eyes. "It's fear." "Fear of what?" "Of someone throwing it in my face one day. Of turning it into a debt I'll never finish paying. Of someone thinking they own me because I accepted help." Arthur exhaled slowly. He understood more than he wanted to. "I would never do that," he said sincerely. She turned her face toward him, exhausted, shaken, but still firm. "You think you know the future, Arthur? I don't. I only know what I've already lived, and it wasn't pretty." The conversation was cut short when Caio's name was called. Isabella stood quickly, hugged her son tight, and walked toward the exam room. Before going in, she looked back at Arthur. "Can you wait here?" "I'm not leaving," he answered. She went inside. Arthur stayed alone in that crowded hallway, but somehow felt empty. Any other millionaire in his place would probably have left already, sent someone to handle it, wired money afterward. But he didn't want to leave. He wanted to stay. Almost 40 minutes later, Isabella stepped out, still carrying Caio, but looking slightly less desperate. "So?" Arthur asked, standing up. "They said it's a lung infection," she explained. "They'll give antibiotics, but they're sending him home. Said to come back if it gets worse." Arthur widened his eyes. "Home. To where I live," she corrected. "It's just a room, but it's what we have." He shut his eyes for a moment, trying to hold back the frustration. "I can pay for a private clinic, Isabella. He could stay under observation, get better meds, be monitored." She tightened her grip around her son. "I can't pay, but I can." "Exactly why I won't," she said firmly. "I don't want to live feeling like my life only stands because some millionaire decided I deserve it." He felt the pain behind those words. Isabella didn't want to be saved. She wanted to be respected. Before he could respond, a familiar voice echoed down the hallway. "Arthur, is that you?" He turned and saw one of the company's investors, accompanied by his wife, both well-dressed, both looking appalled. "What are you doing here?" the man asked. "Did something happen to you?" "To the company?" Arthur took a breath. "No, I'm here with a friend." The man's eyes drifted to Isabella. Sweaty, holding a sick child, clothes worn, exhausted. He frowned immediately. "Friend?" he repeated, heavy with judgment. "This is the kind of company you're keeping now, Arthur?" His wife whispered something in his ear, clearly mocking the scene. Isabella's face burned. Arthur stepped forward. "She's more dignified than most people you know," he said, staring at the investor. "Don't talk to me about dignity," the man snapped. "I'm responsible for the company's name. You are its image. Being seen in public hospitals with this, the news would love a story like that. This." The word hit like a blade. Isabella lowered her head, clutching her son protectively. Arthur considered exploding, screaming, hitting something, but he controlled himself. He looked the investor straight in the eye. "If the company's image is so fragile it can't handle me standing beside a mother fighting for her child, then maybe the problem isn't me." The man gave a dry, nervous laugh. "We'll talk about this in the next meeting. You're confused, Arthur. Very confused." He turned and walked away. His wife followed, throwing one last look of disgust at Isabella. When silence settled again, Isabella let out a trembling breath. "You saw that?" she asked, voice cracking. "That's exactly what I'm trying to protect you from." Arthur faced her. "Protect me from what?" "From losing the respect of your world because you're with me. I know what people say. I know what they'll say, that I'm using you, that I'm chasing your money." She looked at him, tears filling her eyes. "I don't want to be that in your life." Arthur felt his chest tighten painfully. "You're not." "It doesn't matter what I am," she countered. "It matters what people will use against you." She wiped her tears quickly, like someone who never lets herself cry for long. Arthur, maybe you should stay away for a while, at least until I sort out Kaio's situation. The world stopped for him. You want me to go? She hesitated. Her wants and her fears were fighting inside her. I want you not to get hurt because of me, she said softly. And as much as I like having you around, I can't be the reason your world collapses. Arthur felt something hollow open inside him. It wasn't just concern anymore. It was something deeper, a feeling he wasn't ready to name yet. He looked at Kaio, breathing heavily in her arms, then at Isabella, trying to look strong for him, and in that moment, he understood. The problem was no longer just the boy's illness. It wasn't just the tiny rented room, or the street work, or the broken system. Now they had a new enemy. Rumors, judgment, powerful people ready to turn their story into scandal. And still, inside Arthur, one truth grew louder. Even if the whole world stood against them, he wasn't ready to let them go. Not anymore. And the way he would prove that, against everyone, against everything, would change the fate of Arthur, Isabella, and Kaio forever. In the days after the hospital visit, something changed in Isabella's routine. She didn't show up at the intersection. The first night, Arthur assumed she had chosen another spot. The second, he grew restless. By the third night, he was driving in circles across the city, searching at every stoplight, every corner, every street, with a blue bucket and a small cart. Nothing. Her silence said more than any message could. On the fourth night, Arthur went straight to the small building where he knew she rented a room. He parked on the corner, stepped out, and walked quickly, ignoring the curious stares from the neighbors. The building's hallway smelled of mold mixed with cheap cleaning product. Some doors were half open, leaking sounds of loud TV, a couple arguing, a baby crying. He climbed the narrow stairs to the floor where he remembered her room was. Door 203, a cheap door with peeling paint and a crooked number. Arthur knocked. Silence. He knocked again, a little louder. Isabella. It's Arthur. For a few seconds, he thought she wasn't there. Then he heard the clinking of a chain being moved, followed by slow footsteps. The door opened a few centimeters, just enough to show her face. She was pale, dark circles under her eyes, hair thrown back in a messy bun. She looked exhausted. "Arthur, what are you doing here?" "You disappeared," he said bluntly. "I got worried." She glanced down the hallway, as if checking to see if anyone had seen him. "You shouldn't have come, and you shouldn't be facing this alone," he replied. Before she could answer, a sound from inside cut their voices. A whimper, weak, followed by a deep, painful cough. Arthur's eyes widened. "Is that Kaio?" Isabella hesitated for a second, just enough for him to understand. "Open the door," he asked. "Please." She took a deep breath, like someone about to make a hard choice. Then she removed the chain and opened the door fully. The room was tiny. A single bed, an old mattress on the floor, a crooked dresser, a badly sealed window where cold wind rushed in freely. Kaio lay there, flushed, sweating, breathing with difficulty. Arthur approached immediately. "How long has he been like this?" "Since last night," Isabella said, voice shaking. "He got a little better with the medicine, but today it got worse again. The fever won't stop." Arthur touched the boy's forehead. He was burning. "Isabella, this is serious. He could be having complications. We need to take him to a better hospital, now." "I don't have money to admit him to a private hospital," she murmured. "I do." She looked at him, exhausted. "And I've already told you I don't want to live feeling indebted." "This isn't a debt," Arthur replied firmly. "It's your son, his life." She hesitated. Arthur stepped closer, aiming for the place where logic couldn't reach. "Listen to me. If it were you on that bed right now, and I were standing here, would you let me walk away without helping?" Isabella closed her eyes. She knew the answer. She knew she would never abandon someone in that situation. "No," she admitted quietly. "Then let me do for you what you do for me," he said. "This isn't about money. It's about conscience. If I go home tonight and pretend I didn't see this, I'll never sleep again." She looked at Kaio, struggling to breathe, his tiny hands sweating from fever. Her defenses began to crumble. "And what if one day you regret it?" she whispered. "What if one day you throw this in my face?" Arthur took a deep breath and looked at her with a seriousness that almost hurt. "Then that will be the day I stop being the man I'm trying to become. And if that ever happens, you'll walk away. But today, Isabella, today isn't about what could go wrong. It's about not losing your son." Silence filled the room. Only Kaio's strained breathing broke it. Finally, she nodded. "All right," she murmured. "But I'm paying you back. Even if it takes my whole life, I'm paying." Arthur swallowed the emotion rising in his throat. "We'll talk about that later. For now, get his documents. We're going." 30 minutes later, they arrived at a mid-sized private clinic. Not the fanciest in the city, but worlds better than the crowded public hospital. At the reception, while the attendant explained procedures, documents, insurance, Arthur spoke first. "Put everything under my name. Private. Whatever it takes." Isabella looked tense, but didn't argue. Her fear was still there, but now mixed with something new, hope. Kaio was taken in quickly. The doctor ordered urgent exams, chest x-ray, blood tests, everything. Hours later, the diagnosis came. "He has a fairly advanced pneumonia," the doctor said. "If he had waited a bit longer, it could have become something much more dangerous. But we got him in time. He'll need to stay hospitalized for a few days, take IV antibiotics, and be monitored." Isabella felt the ground vanish beneath her. If he had waited a bit longer. She turned to Arthur, eyes filling with tears. If he hadn't shown up, if he hadn't insisted, if she had let pride win. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked, voice trembling. "With proper treatment, yes," the doctor replied. "But don't take this lightly. Poor children usually arrive too late. Thankfully, that wasn't the case here." He left them alone. Isabella sat down in the chair beside the bed as Kaio was prepared for admission. She held his hand so tightly it looked like she believed she could keep him alive, just with her grip. Arthur stood beside her, unsure whether to step closer or farther away, until she called him, in a tone he had never heard from her before. "Arthur." He moved closer. "I was wrong." His eyebrows tightened. "Wrong about what?" "Wrong for thinking I had to face the whole world alone, just to prove I'm strong," she said, her eyes still fixed on her son. "I thought accepting help would make me smaller. But if you hadn't come, my son might have—" The sentence broke apart in her throat. Arthur knelt beside her. "You're not wrong for being strong," he said softly. "You're just tired of people who give with one hand and charge with the other. I get that, but I'm not here to collect anything. I'm here because I care." She finally looked at him, not as a millionaire, not as someone from another world, but as a man who was there, fully, for her and her child. "Why?" she asked, her voice fragile and honest in a way that startled even her. "Why do you care this much? There are so many rich people who pretend they don't see. You could be like them." Arthur took a deep breath, as if stepping through an invisible line inside himself. "Because I'm tired of living surrounded by people who only stay when everything is perfect," he said. "Because I've never seen anyone fight like you fight. Because when I look at you, I see someone who doesn't sell themselves even when the world tries to crush them." He paused. His next words came out lower, almost trembling. "And because I can't picture my life without you two anymore." The words hung between them. Isabella felt her heart tremble, scared, confused, but warm in a way she hadn't felt in years. Love was not something she believed in anymore, not after Kaio's father walked out at the first sign of difficulty. But there, in that cold room, with her son hooked to machines, someone said they wouldn't leave, not out of pity, not out of charity, but out of choice. She looked at her son, then back at Arthur, and tears slid silently down her cheeks. "I don't know if I can believe all that right now," she admitted, "but I see what you're doing, and I'm grateful, more than I can explain." Arthur raised his hand slowly, like he was asking permission to touch a part of her no one had touched in years. He rested his hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to believe me today," he said. "Just let me stay." She drew a long breath, then nodded. Stay. One simple word. But for him it sounded like a promise. The following hours were a mix of fear, exhaustion, and hope. Kaio received medication, was monitored, began breathing easier. Every so often the doctor returned with updates. "He's responding well to the antibiotics," he said during one visit. "The fever is beginning to drop. Tomorrow is still delicate, but he's moving in the right direction." Isabella squeezed her hands together, emotional. Arthur exhaled deeply, as if shedding a weight he had been carrying for days. Late at night, when the room was finally quiet, with soft lights and only the soft beeping of monitors, Kaio slept peacefully for the first time in days. Isabella broke the silence. "Arthur, you said you can't imagine your life without us." "I did." She rubbed her face, as if ashamed of saying what came next. "I don't know what I can offer you. I don't have anything. I don't have status. I don't have a degree. I don't have a fancy last name." He smiled faintly. "You have the one thing most people I know don't. Truth." She swallowed hard, fighting tears. "I'm just a single mom who cleans windows at an intersection." "No," he replied immediately. "You're the bravest woman I've ever seen. And if someday I have to choose between the world I used to live in and this one, with you and Kaio, I already know which one I'm choosing." She stared at him, stunned. "You'd lose everything for that?" Arthur looked at her son sleeping, and all the connections formed in his mind: the company, the investors, the reputation, the dinners, the headlines. Then he looked at Isabella again. "If everything means a hollow life full of people who only know how to judge, then I'm not losing anything." She took a deep breath, shaken. In that simple hospital room, surrounded by cold walls and humming machines, something became unmistakably clear. This wasn't a millionaire rescuing a poor mother. This was a man exhausted by fake people finally finding someone who had only ever known hardship. And together they were saving the purest part of themselves, the child. Love wasn't spoken yet, not directly. But the way Arthur held Isabella's hand, and the way she didn't let go, said everything neither of them was ready to say out loud. And the world outside, with its gossip, prejudice, and judging eyes, had no idea what was taking shape in that small room. But it would find out, much sooner than they imagined, because once Kaio walked out of that hospital, nothing would ever be the same. Not for Arthur, not for Isabella, not for the life they were about to build, with or without the approval of those who always looked down on them. Kaio stayed hospitalized for 4 days, 4 long, quiet, frightening days, but also full of something new: presence. Arthur never left the hospital. He rotated shifts with Isabella, brought her coffee, monitored exams, spoke to the doctors, handled every form, every signature, anything to keep her from drowning in bureaucracy alone. Isabella watched all of this with a mix of relief and disbelief. She had never seen a rich man get his hands dirty because of someone else's pain, especially for someone like her. When Kaio was finally discharged, already smiling and breathing normally, Arthur walked with them to the hospital exit. The sunlight hit the boy's face, and he stretched his arms out as if he were feeling the world for the very first time. Isabella lifted him into her arms and held him tight. Arthur felt his chest warm at that sight. It was simple, but it was everything. "So, what now?" Arthur asked, unable to hide the fear in his voice. Isabella looked at him with a steady gaze. "Now, I want to try living without running away." He inhaled slowly. "What does that mean?" She stepped closer, took his hand, held it. "It means I don't want to push you away anymore. I don't want to pretend you're not important to us. It means that if you really want to stay, I'm going to let you." Arthur smiled, a smile that didn't even fit on his face. It was the first time in a long while that he felt he was exactly where he was meant to be. No fancy dinners, no appearances, no masks. Just a man, a woman, and a child safe in her arms. And for the first time, the three of them walked together. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Life had finally begun to change, and this time, it was real. The story of Arthur, Isabella, and Kaio is proof that love doesn't always appear where the world expects it. Sometimes, it's born exactly where no one pays attention, at a forgotten intersection, in a simple hospital room, in a gesture no one else sees. Because real wealth isn't in money, it's in the people who stay when everything falls apart. It's in the ones who hold your hand without asking for anything in return. And you? What did this story make you feel? Write it in the comments. I read every single one. If you enjoy powerful, emotional stories filled with poetic justice like this one, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with someone who needs this message today. Your support helps keep stories like this coming. Stories that touch, transform, and stay with you. I'll see you in the next one. Until then.